I'm Lee Lewis. I'm the Artistic Director of Griffin Theatre Company, which is Australia's only company dedicated to new Australian plays. So surprise, surprise, our 2016 season is filled with Australian plays. No, it's really the talk of the town next year's season. For such a small company, we're having a huge impact with 5 great new works from significant writers in the Australian theatre industry. Alana Valentine, who's writing our first play for the year. It's called Ladies' Day. It's a wonderful play that was based on interviews that she did with men in the gay community of Broome, and from there she's created this extraordinary fictional journey which will ask some really tough questions, both of the gay community but also of the theatre industry and media in general. So one of our toughest thinkers is challenging us, and I can't wait to see what we come up with as a reply. Let me tell you a little bit about Phil Kavanagh, who's a great young talent who lives in South Australia. The play that we're doing next year of his is Replay, and it's a great privilege for us to be introducing him as a writer to Sydney audiences. Replay is a beautiful story about 3 brothers, and it's Phil playing with questions about masculinity in Australia in a way that is really young and fresh, and really a movement away from what you'd call some of the old stereotypes of Australian men. So I see a very hopeful voice in there. He takes that very common human experience of going, hang on, did that actually happen? And turns that into a slightly science fiction story of, well, if you could change your memory, would you change reality? And it becomes almost like this Matrix moment where you start to believe that it's all, that your life is all a construction. So what he's actually done is given us a theatre version of the multiverse. It's nearly 50 years ago that John Bell and Ken Horler started working in the Stables Theatre. Now, Nimrod moved on, we know that, they took the street name, and Griffin stayed to make new Australian plays. So it's a really special thing for me next year to have Bell Shakespeare in the building. We're bringing the 2 big stories of Australian theatre together in one production written by Justin Fleming, and it's his translation and adaptation of Molière's play Les Femmes Savantes. Justin's understanding of the Australian sensibility and the Australian ear and how we can hear French poetry in an Australian voice, I think is quite unique, and we need to celebrate that. He's an extraordinary talent, and we're so thrilled to have him in the building. The gorgeous Kate Mulvaney will be leading that cast, and it's a tiny cast for a very big play. And please don't ask me how I'm going to do it, because it's not all figured out yet, and sometimes there should be mysteries as to how it's actually going to happen. Gloria is a really complex play. It's from the mind of one of our great theatre makers, Benedict Andrews, and he hasn't lived in Australia for quite a while now. But what I saw when I read this play was a portrait of Australia and our anxiety about our luck. We know we're lucky, we know we're wealthy, we know that luck and wealth doesn't extend to all of our population by any stretch of the imagination, and we know that relative to the rest of the world, this luck might run out. So there's a layer of anxiety and fear and greediness and grasping that we all try and deny, and I think that's what he is embodying in Gloria. There was one actress I thought of when I read the play, and I thought, if she'll do it, I'll do it. And that actress is Marta Dusseldorp. Now, Marta's exceptionally busy. I don't know how she's doing it. She's moving between different networks and Foxtel, between A Place to Call Home and Jack Irish and Janet King. She's quite an extraordinary, she's making her mark on the Australian television landscape. And what I see with Marta looking at the incredible challenge that is Gloria is an actor at the top of her game, looking at a piece of writing which she knows she can make her own. And I think we're going to be in for a wild ride in her return to the Sydney stage. The Turquoise Elephant was the winner of the Griffin Award this year. So we're thrilled to have it on stage next year. When I started at Griffin, I was in charge of running the Griffin Award, and it was one of my great challenges to make sure that the plays that won got productions. We don't promise it, and sometimes the plays are incredibly difficult and we don't know how we're going to pull it off, and Turquoise Elephant is one of them. The play itself is set in a near future city where we shut out the 50-degree temperatures outside with triple glazed windows and huge air conditioners, and it offers amazing roles to 2 older actresses in Sydney. I'm not sure who they're going to be yet. And actually, there have been some quite extraordinary conversations with the director of the play, who is Gail Edwards. Now, you will all know Gail from her work around the globe. She is Australia's most successful theatre director. And at the moment, she spends half a year directing Opera on the Harbour, which is a slightly different scale to the Griffin space, I grant you. We do like a little bit of the ridiculous, and I have to say, Stephen Carlton's play is beyond ridiculous. It's quite an extraordinary black farce. I think it's a farce. Given that they're glass doors, you can't really slam them. And I think I've always thought that farces needed slamming doors. But it's a deeply important play about species in crisis, about the decimation of the planet, and about the pillage of the resources of the planet by wealthy nations, and the damage that that's doing. So there's a massive political underscore to this play. But what sits at the front is a very funny family drama with some of the most shocking and funny entrances and exits I've ever seen. So I know it will be fun, I just have no idea how we're going to pull it off. So in a year of many challenges, we're ending with the biggest challenge of all in Turquoise Elephant. A lot of people ask me where we find our plays, and I have to say it's somewhat of a mysterious process. Some of it's the industry of it. We have the Griffin Award, which gives us probably about 150 new plays a year to read. And then we have the Lysicrides Award, which gives us another number of plays from more established writers. On top of that, there are plays that people send in to me with a note saying, please read this. Or a friend will say, I've got a friend who's written a play, can they send it to you? So I spend a lot of time, like everybody, on public transport in Sydney, thinking about where the city's going and what matters. And then I try to find stories that are relevant to the experience of our living at the moment. But sometimes they're inspired by things that are happening in the city, in this country, or in the world at the moment. And then over time, they find the deep questions that sit within those stories. So that the questions they're asking to us are big ones that move over a lot of time. So, someone said to me once, I remember the quote, literature is news that stays news. And that was really interesting because once upon a time it was news, but what mattered in it stayed news. It stays a story worth telling, and those are the plays we're really looking for. Look, there's a lot of theatre going on in Sydney. I love it for that reason. So why should you come up the hill to the SBW Stables Theatre to see a new Australian play? Because it matters, that's why. Because these plays are important documents of our time, and if that seems too lofty, it's not. Don't you want to be documented? Don't you want there to be a record of what you thought, of what you laughed at what you thought was funny, at what you thought was deeply disturbing? That's what Australian writers are writing, is a document of what you are thinking now. And maybe this is the biggest ego trip company in the country, in that it's all Australian plays, and that's important. But maybe we need to have an ego about our stories and say these are important, and in the scheme of the world we have a perspective on the world that doesn't belong anywhere else and maybe isn't interesting to the rest of the world but is damn interesting to us. That's why you have to come and see an Australian play.